After the Colorado Supreme Court ruled that Donald Trump committed insurrection and violated the Constitution and is therefore disqualified from holding public office, the right wing reacted poorly. In addition to issuing death threats against the Colorado justices in question, many are demanding that red states retaliate against President Biden by removing him from the ballots for, reasons? Maybe? But before we unpack all that, if you haven't yet, please hit that like, subscribe, and the alert bell. All right, friends, I have several clips to play, but the theme of this particular video, just to get it out of the way, is that Republican elected officials, conservative commentators, and unfortunately, millions of right-wingers across this country, family members and friends of ours, no doubt, are genuinely terrified at the prospect that Donald Trump, their cult leader, is not above the Constitution. So with that in mind, let's play the clips and we'll unpack it together.
But if Democrats want to play games with cobweb laws from a century ago, the only time Section 3 of the 14th Amendment was used was to remove a socialist who provided aid and comfort to the enemy. That's right. In 1919, socialist Congressman Victor Berger was caught helping the Germans in World War I. So we can strip Biden from the ballot for giving aid and comfort to Iran, China, Venezuela, right?
So that was Jesse Watters from the Fox Propaganda Network, a legitimately stupid and bad faith actor. And I think there are 3 or 4 things I want to address there. Number one, we can't stop you, Jesse, from trying to do that. Everybody expected that Republicans would try to retaliate in bad faith, so knock yourself out, literally. Number 2, cobweb laws? Really? You're complaining about the age of Section 3 of the 14th Amendment? The Second Amendment is older still, and you play games with the Second Amendment all the time. Why is it okay for you all to try to apply an older amendment, the Second Amendment, but it's not okay for us to apply the 14th Amendment to Donald Trump? Sounds like a double standard, which we should reject. Number 3, your example with Victor Berger. So Victor Berger was caught helping our official enemies, the Germans, in an officially declared war, which was World War I. It's pretty different from now, which brings us to number 4. We're not officially at war with Russia, Venezuela, or China, and they're not officially our enemies. So none of this is really comparable. But if there's anybody who can give a dumber, more bad faith argument than Jesse Watters, it's elected Republican Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene. Take it away, Marge.
Well, it is insane, and that's what everybody is calling it. Absolutely insane. But Eric, let's be honest. If the left, if the Democrats want to start making these rules, well, guess what? We can use the same exact rules. For example, we could take Joe Biden off the ballot in red states and other states because he is committing treason with his border policies, and the invasion has gotten so bad at the southern border. We could also take his name off the ballot because of the impeachment inquiry that we've been doing on the Oversight Committee, and we produced evidence that Joe Biden has definitely participated in Hunter Biden's business deals with foreign countries and sold his power for political favors, and he's received the financial benefit from that because we have the checks. And so I'm a big believer if the left wants to make new rules, well, we should make them live and play by their own rules.
So obviously Marjorie Taylor Greene said a lot of stupid and dishonest things there. Her 2 points were, red states can take off Joe Biden because the southern invasion at the southern border and then their impeachment inquiry. It's number 1. As we've discussed, there is a legitimate issue at the southern border. There's no doubt about it. But the funding and the manpower and the policies under the Biden administration are virtually identical to those under the Trump administration, except to give him somewhat credit, President Biden has been a bit less cruel in terms of issues of family separation. There have been a record number of arrests at the southern border. So Border Patrol and Department of Homeland Security under Biden, they're doing their jobs. And if Congress wants to change that and give them more resources, more manpower, and better policies, then Congress, which includes Marjorie Taylor Greene and not Joe Biden, since he's not part of Congress, they have to do their job to empower the president to address the issue at the southern border, number 1. Number 2, the impeachment inquiry. That's not an insurrection. Okay, that's not, the 14th Amendment has nothing to do with an impeachment inquiry or, any sort of financial entanglements between father and son. They haven't proven that Joe Biden has corruptly engaged in any sort of malpractice or unethical behavior. They can't point to a policy that Joe Biden has changed or created or destroyed, in favor of his Chinese or Ukrainian overlords or whatever. They talk about checks. Those are loan repayment checks, which we've talked about, in which Joe, when he was not president or vice president, when he was a private citizen, loaned his brother and his son money, and then his son and his brother paid them back. We have the financial records to prove it. So again, just complete dishonesty. But the point is, she does make one point, which is they don't really need a good faith predicate to retaliate in kind. They just can. That's what Republicans do, and everybody should expect that. But it's also not just Marjorie Taylor Greene. It's also Donald Trump, the leader, the cult leader himself of the Republican Party. So a right-wing commentator posted this, that if Colorado bans Trump from the ballot and the U.S. Supreme Court does not intervene, all states with Republican Supreme Courts must strike Biden from the ballot too. If they want to end democracy, we can do the same. They're going to start a civil war. Okay, and Donald Trump retruthed this. I retruthed this on Truth Central. You can see it right here. So a couple of things. I think it's ironic that this guy's admitting that if they were to do that, that they would be trying to end democracy. They're just openly admitting it, number one. Number two, it wasn't Democrats who brought this case. It was Republican voters who brought this case to Colorado, and the Colorado Supreme Court made their decision. So it's actually Republicans trying to take Donald Trump off the ballot in Colorado. So he's very much confused there. But the bottom line is that Donald Trump is full-throatedly endorsing this plan of retaliation. So then the question becomes, what are they actually doing about it? Because now we've heard prominent right-wing commentators, we've heard elected Republican officials, we've heard the grand poobah himself of the Republican cult. They all seem to be in concert endorsing this plan. Well, before I answer what they're doing about it, I want to remind you of something I said in the intro, which is that the Colorado Supreme Court are facing a surge of death threats since issuing this ruling. NBC reports Colorado Supreme Court justices face a flood of threats after disqualifying Trump from the ballot. The latest round of threats fits a familiar pattern. Trump faces a legal setback, and officials face threats. In the 24 hours since the Colorado Supreme Court kicked Trump off the state's Republican primary ballot, social media outlets have been flooded with threats against the justices who ruled in the case, according to a report obtained by NBC News. Advanced Democracy, a nonpartisan nonprofit organization that conducts public interest research, identified, quote, significant violent rhetoric against the justices and Democrats, often in direct response to Trump's post about the ruling on his platform, Truth Central. They found that some social media users posted the justices' email addresses, phone numbers, and office building addresses. And then they quote a spate of threats. This ends when we kill these effers. That's one quote. Another quote, what do you call 7 justices from the Colorado Supreme Court at the bottom of the ocean? A good start, quote. And all the things. It keeps going. It provides, apparently it's like posts whose images and links were included in the report noted a variety of methods that could be used to kill those perceived as Trump's enemies: hollow point bullets, rifles, rope, bombs. Folks, this is absolutely indefensibly deranged, and it's just disproportionately on the right. We don't see this level of derangement, generally speaking, on the left. It's insane. And Trump has a moral obligation, especially as the leader of the party of law and order in Jesus Christ, to actively, aggressively try to shut this down and say, no, this is not what we stand for. Don't you dare, if you're a supporter of mine, do these things. But of course, he's not saying that. In fact, he's probably actively encouraging it. I digress. So now, what about the threat to remove Biden? Well, Republican lawmakers in at least 3 swing states are attempting to do just that, according to Newsweek. Republican lawmakers in 3 swing states have announced their plan to remove President Biden from their state ballots. One guy from Pennsylvania's House of Representatives, another from the Arizona House of Representatives, and another from the Georgia House of Representatives released a joint statement on Thursday announcing their plan to remove Biden from the general election ballot. Let's see here. Today, we are joining forces to introduce legislation to remove Joe Biden from the ballot in Georgia, Arizona, and Pennsylvania. The absurdity of radical Democrat judges removing Donald Trump from the ballot in Colorado will be a stain on the American political system for decades. By their very own interpretation of the law, Joe Biden is 100% not eligible to run for public office. Let's see here. Democrats' insane justification to remove Trump can just as easily be applied to Joe Biden for his, quote, insurrection at the southern border and his alleged corrupt family business dealings in China. So listen, they're going to do it. They're going to try, at least. And will they be successful? I mean, maybe, right? If you get the right court in the right red state, judges can say anything. That's the thing. Like, law has to be interpreted, right? And obviously we agree that some arguments are better than others, but we've also looked at a gazillion examples. My God, look at Citizens United. Money is speech, right? Very intelligent, very educated lawyers and judges can make sophisticated arguments for anything, right? It comes down to interpretation and them using their authority. So if you get the right, combination of the right red state and the right Supreme Court justices, it's entirely possible that this can happen. But the point is this: we can't let that deter us. As I've said to people in debates, people who are centrist, people who are more moderate than me, the idea that Democrats shouldn't do a thing, or that people in general shouldn't do a thing because if they do, it increases the chance that Republicans will retaliate in bad faith. That should never be a deterrent, because Republicans can and will always retaliate in bad faith, and they actually don't need us to do a thing first to piss them off. We've seen it throughout legislative history. My God, look at Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, somebody who is much more strategic than a Marjorie Taylor Greene or a Jesse Waters or a Donald Trump, he very often initiated bad faith attacks or bad faith attacks on institutions and norms for his benefit. This idea that we're in a turn-based RPG and we have to do something first in order to give Republicans permission to respond in kind, it's never been the case. So we need to do what's right. And sure, we need to be thoughtful about it. We need to put our best foot forward. But this idea that we shouldn't do a thing or we must do a thing out of fear of how Republicans will react is very much, if you don't mind the crude metaphor, it's like advising a battered spouse to not defend herself against her abusive husband, because if she defends herself, it might trigger the abusive spouse to try to attack her harder. That's insane. We would never make that advice. We would never say something like that. We would actually enthusiastically condemn anybody who says it. We have a right to political self-defense. We have a right to legal self-defense. And I would argue that holding Donald Trump accountable for the insurrection on January 6th and disqualifying him under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment is constitutional self-defense. He's not entitled for a second shot at the title, a second bite at the apple after he did what he did. And Republicans, they're going to do their best, I'm sure, to try to retaliate in kind against President Biden, but we can't stop it, and we should not let that deter us from doing what's right. Let me know what you think in the comments.